Chapter 1. The Dental Dilemma. Iceni stared at the blurry X-ray, a grimace twisting his face. Honestly, Agnes, he groaned, I think I've got more cavities than a Swiss cheese factory. Agnes, perched on the edge of his worn-out sofa in Vancouver, chuckled. Don't worry, love. You'll look like a pirate with a gap-toothed grin. It's charming. Iceni snorted. Charming? I look like I could scare small children. Seriously, this is getting ridiculous. I can't even enjoy a decent toke without worrying about crumbs getting stuck in my teeth. A mischievous glint entered Agnes's eyes. Tell you what, Iceni, how about we solve this dental dilemma in style? In style? Iceni raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind, Agnes? Cuba, Agnes declared, a mischievous glint in his eye. Cheap dentistry, beautiful beaches, and enough rum to sink a battleship. We get our teeth fixed, soak up the sun, and maybe even learn to salsa. Iceni blinked. Cuba? Agnes, you're serious. Dead serious, Agnes confirmed, a grin spreading across his face. Imagine it, you get a Hollywood smile, I get to finally escape this frozen tundra, and we get to spend a week together in paradise. What could possibly go wrong? Iceni stared at his computer screen, the image of Agnes's smiling face suddenly seeming much more appealing. Well, I can't say I've ever considered Cuba as a dental tourism destination. Exactly, Agnes exclaimed, leaning forward. It'll be an adventure. We'll find a dodgy dentist with a questionable accent, haggle over prices in broken Spanish, and probably end up getting lost in a maze of backstreets. It'll be legendary. Iceni couldn't help but grin. Agnes's infectious enthusiasm was starting to wear him down. All right, Agnes, he conceded. You've twisted my arm, but if we end up with crooked teeth and a tropical disease, you're buying me a lifetime supply of weed. Agnes threw his head back and roared with laughter. Deal! And so the unlikely duo of Iceni, the British stoner with a penchant for complaining, and Agnes, the Canadian dreamer with a thirst for adventure, embarked on a journey that promised to be as chaotic as it was unforgettable. Chapter 2. The Journey to Havana. The journey to Cuba was, to put it mildly, eventful. Iceni, ever the pragmatist, had meticulously planned their itinerary, complete with flight confirmations, a list of reputable, or at least seemingly reputable dentists, and a carefully curated playlist of reggae and ska. Agnes, however, had other ideas. Iceni, my dear, he declared, crumpling up his meticulously planned itinerary. We're going to wing it. And wing it they did. Their first flight was delayed by a volcanic eruption in Iceland. A minor inconvenience, Agnes pointed out, as it gave them more time to enjoy the duty-free. They missed their connecting flight in Miami due to an unexpected detour to pick up a stray dog. Agnes insisted on adopting it, but Iceni, with visions of quarantine and customs officials, firmly vetoed the idea. Finally, after a series of misadventures that would have made a seasoned travel agent weep, they landed in Havana, a whirlwind of vibrant colors, crumbling colonial architecture, and the intoxicating scent of cigars and rum. Their quest for dental excellence began with a visit to a clinic recommended by a local musician they met in a smoky bar. The clinic, it turned out, was located above a bakery, the aroma of freshly baked bread mingling with the faint scent of something less appetizing. The dentist, a jovial man with a handlebar mustache and a disconcerting fondness for rum, introduced himself as Dr. Ricardo. No worries, amigos, he assured them, his accent thick as molasses. I'll fix teeth, I'll make you smile like Hollywood star. Iceni exchanged a nervous glance with Agnes. They were about to find out if Dr. Ricardo lived up to his own hype. The dental procedures were, to say the least, unconventional. Dr. Ricardo's methods involved a liberal application of rum, both for the patient and himself, some questionable tools that looked like they belonged in a medieval torture chamber, and a soundtrack of Cuban salsa music that had Iceni's teeth vibrating. Agnes, however, was having the time of his life. He charmed Dr. Ricardo with his infectious laughter and his limited Spanish, regaling him with tales of his life in Canada and his deep admiration for Cuban rum. Iceni, meanwhile, tried to suppress his anxieties by focusing on the rhythmic beat of the salsa music and the mesmerizing sway of the bakery girls who occasionally peeked in through the window. Miraculously, the procedures were a success. Iceni emerged with a surprisingly straight set of teeth, while Agnes, ever the adventurer, had opted for a slightly more eccentric set of gold grills. Chapter 3: The Unexpected Salsa Sensation. The salsa lessons were proving to be a disaster. Iceni, stiff as a board and hopelessly out of time, resembled a startled penguin trying to perform a mating dance. Agnes, bless his soul, was equally inept, his attempts at graceful movement more akin to a drunken spider flailing its limbs. Their instructor, a fiery woman named Celia with eyes that could melt glaciers, watched their struggles with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. Amigos, she sighed, you have the rhythm of a dying cockroach. Iceni, wincing, muttered something about cultural barriers and stiff British joints. Agnes, however, took the criticism in stride. Dying cockroach, eh? Sounds like a new dance craze, he declared, attempting a particularly flamboyant spin that resulted in him tripping over his own feet. Celia burst out laughing. You have a spirit, amigo, but you need to relax, to let the music flow through you. And so, Celia embarked on a mission to unleash the inner dancers within Iceni and Agnes. She started by teaching them basic steps, breaking them down into simple, manageable movements. Iceni, surprisingly, proved to be a quick learner, his inherent sense of rhythm gradually emerging from beneath the layers of self-consciousness. Agnes, however, remained a source of constant amusement. His attempts at sensual hip movements were particularly hilarious, often resulting in unintentional groin thrusts and exaggerated gyrations. Despite their initial struggles, Iceni and Agnes persevered. They practiced for hours, their laughter echoing through the small dance studio. They stumbled, they tripped, they occasionally collided, but they never gave up. Celia, ever patient, offered encouragement and gentle corrections, her own infectious enthusiasm inspiring them to keep trying. One evening, while practicing in their small guesthouse room, they decided to try their newfound skills at a local bar. The bar, a lively spot with a pulsating beat and a smoky atmosphere, was filled with locals swaying and swirling to the music. Iceni and Agnes, initially hesitant, tentatively stepped onto the dance floor. At first, they were a spectacle. Their movements were clumsy, their timing off, and they frequently bumped into other dancers. But as the music washed over them, something unexpected happened. They started to relax, to let go of their inhibitions. Iceni, surprisingly, found himself moving with a newfound grace, his body responding instinctively to the rhythm. Agnes, ever the showman, embraced the chaos, his exaggerated movements becoming a source of unintentional hilarity. The other dancers, initially amused by the two gringos stumbling around the dance floor, were gradually drawn in. Soon they were laughing, clapping, and even joining in, their impromptu performance becoming a source of shared joy. By the end of the night, Iceni and Agnes, exhausted but exhilarated, had become the unexpected stars of the bar. They had discovered a hidden talent, a newfound confidence, and a deeper connection with the vibrant spirit of Cuba. As they walked back to their guest house, the music still echoing in their ears, Iceni turned to Agnes and grinned. Who knew, he said, that two old geezers could cause such a commotion on the dance floor? Agnes, his gold grills gleaming in the moonlight, raised his glass in a toast. To Cuba, he declared, and to the unexpected joys of salsa dancing. And as they sipped their rum, they knew that this was a night they would never forget. Chapter 4: The Ghost of El Presidente, revised. The vibrant nightlife of Havana began to lose its charm for Agnes. He'd been craving something a little stronger. The rum, while potent, simply wasn't cutting it. He'd overheard whispers in the smoky bars, tales of a certain white powder that could elevate the Cuban experience to another level. Intrigued, Agnes began to discreetly inquire amongst the locals. He frequented dimly lit bars, striking up conversations with patrons who looked like they might know the ropes. He used his charm, his easy laughter, and a generous supply of Cuban cigars to gain their trust. Finally, after a few days of careful maneuvering, he was introduced to a man named Carlos, a wiry figure with eyes that held a knowing glint. Carlos, after a series of cryptic questions and a hushed exchange of cash, promised to deliver. The meeting was to take place in a secluded alleyway, a dark and narrow passageway, reeking of stale rum and desperation. Agnes, heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, arrived at the designated spot. He waited, his senses on high alert, the sounds of the city fading into a distant hum. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a hulking man with a scar that slashed across his cheek. "You must be the gringo," he growled, his voice a low, menacing rumble. Agnes, startled, tried to play it cool. "The name's Agnes, and you are?" The scarred man eyed him suspiciously. "Let's just say I'm Carlos's associate." He gestured towards a crate leaning against the wall. "The goods are here." Agnes's eyes widened. He cautiously approached the crate and peered inside. It was filled with cigars, expensive Cuban cigars, the kind that connoisseurs drooled over. Agnes, caught off guard, felt a wave of disappointment wash over him. He tried to mask his disappointment with a nonchalant shrug. "Well, these are certainly interesting." He slipped a few into his pocket, feeling a surge of adrenaline and a strange sense of exhilaration. He decided to cut his losses and make a hasty retreat. As he hurried back to their guest house, the incident fading into a blur of confusion and adrenaline, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticlimax. Later that night, while enjoying a final mojito on their balcony, Agnes confessed his ill-fated attempt at Iceni. Iceni, initially horrified, couldn't help but chuckle. "You, Agnes, you almost got yourself killed over a few cigars?" Agnes shrugged, still shaken by the experience. "They looked important. And besides," he added with a sheepish grin, "I'm sure they'll make for a very interesting souvenir." Iceni, however, was not convinced. He sensed a lingering danger, a feeling that their brush with the underworld was far from over. "Agnes," he said, his voice serious, "I think we should leave Cuba sooner than planned." Agnes, despite his initial reluctance, knew Iceni was right. They had unwittingly stumbled into a dangerous world, a world where a simple misadventure could have had deadly consequences. The next morning, they checked out of their guest house and hurried to the airport. As their plane took off, leaving Havana shrinking below them, they both breathed a sigh of relief. They had escaped the clutches of the Cuban underworld, but they also carried with them a shared secret, a memory forever tinged with fear and a touch of exhilarating danger. Chapter 5: The Return. The flight back to Canada was a blur of exhaustion and lingering adrenaline. Agnes, despite his initial disappointment, couldn't shake off the feeling that he'd been on the edge of something extraordinary, a taste of the forbidden, a glimpse into the darker side of Havana. Iceni, ever the pragmatist, was more focused on the prospect of returning to his own bed and a good night's sleep. He also couldn't help but wonder about the long-term effects of Dr. Ricardo's unconventional dental techniques. Back in Vancouver, reality began to set in. The vibrant chaos of Havana seemed a distant memory, replaced by the familiar routine of everyday life. Yet the echoes of their Cuban adventure lingered. They spent countless hours recounting their misadventures, from the disastrous salsa lessons to the near-fatal encounter in the alleyway. Agnes, true to his word, bought Iceni a lifetime supply of weed, a small token of gratitude for surviving their Cuban escapade. Iceni, in turn, gifted Agnes a box of the finest Cuban cigars, a reminder of their shared brush with danger. Months later, as they sat on Agnes's porch enjoying a leisurely afternoon toke, they couldn't help but reminisce about their Cuban adventure. It had been a journey filled with laughter, chaos, and a touch of the unexpected. They had faced their fears, embraced the unknown, and forged a bond that would last a lifetime. And as they gazed at the setting sun, they knew that their Cuban adventure with all its twists and turns, would forever hold a special place in their hearts. The end.